Dear friends, thank you so much for joining us on this lovely autumn day for our 7th annual Elevating Commercial Real Estate Conference. My name is Lou Kramer. I'm privileged to serve as the CEO of Colliers Utah as part of our Intermountain team of 250 professionals who are focusing on helping each of you find solutions that connect with productive outcomes for your commercial real estate needs. Particularly at this Thanksgiving season, we are grateful for your trust and the opportunities to serve you. Many of you have attended all 7 of our previous Elevating Commercial Real Estate conferences, which have been usually held in Park City, high in the mountains, in the midst of genuinely elevated locations where we help clarify our vision and our insights looking forward for economic visibility for the coming year. Well, we're not in the mountains today, but we're actually in the foothills of the mountains. And if you look out the window, you can see from our new Mill Rock office, those beautiful mountains. And we are going to use that elevating perspective to give guidance today. We've condensed our previous sessions into 90 packed minutes, 3 different sessions, and we will look forward to providing you the insights you need as every day you plan, pivot, adapt many times a day for this challenging world we're in. The quick update on Colliers International. Recently, we became the 3rd largest commercial real estate company on the planet. We have 15,000 professionals serving in over 500 offices in 68 countries in any kind of full service commercial real estate needs you may have. Today, we're going to have 3 30-minute sessions. First with our keynoter, Natalie Gochner. The second session will be with our chairman, Brandon Fugel, questioning and learning from Alan Matheson. And then the final session will be from commercial real estate experts looking at the coming year. So we hope to provide you the kind of data, insights, and visibility that will be helpful for you as you plan going forward. As part of our annual conference, we are also making preparations to have our Trusted Advisors magazine come out in the springtime. So with that schedule today, the first 30 minutes, we have the privilege of hearing from Natalie Gochner, the head of the Kempsey Gardner Institute at the University of Utah. Natalie is one of those people like Cher or Bono. You only need Natalie in this state to know what is happening. She wears many hats, many titles: professor, trusted advisor, UDOT commissioner, a dean at the University of Utah, and Utah has many, many natural resources, as we know. There's none better than Natalie Gochner on economic issues. So we welcome Natalie. Thank you for spending this first 30 minutes with us, Natalie, and we look forward to getting prepared for the challenges ahead.
Thank you, Lou. That was a kind introduction. I'll just say to the listeners that I'm coming to you from my home in Murray, Utah. And it's a windy day, but a great day to talk about economics. Lou and the team at Colliers asked me to share some economic insights. And I really just want to share really the information that's being shared with state leaders right now. I've been quite involved in the Utah Governor's Office, with the Utah Legislature, with business leaders in sharing economic insights. And so I'm going to just walk you through thinking about Utah's current economic situation, then talk about the COVID-19 response, because that's a really important topic for the economy. And then what's the outlook? So the current economic situation works like this. COVID-19, this will go down as known as the COVID-19 recession. It was a shock. That means it was sudden, severe, and in this case, uneven. We are performing better in Utah than most, if not all states. I'll make that case. But many people, industries, and counties are hit harder than others. That's the uneven part. And then we do believe that we are in a recovery phase, but it's very fragile because of uncertainty. If you look here, what you see is a job change for Utah and the US. The red is Utah, the gray is the US. You can see the shock, the severity of the downturn. You can see us pushing our way back up. We believe by the end of the year that we will be back to the same level of jobs as we had back in February. So we've got to get to zero, job change there. But I will point out that at our lowest point in April in Utah, we we're at where the nation, about where the nation's at today. And that gives you a sense for how different it feels in Utah. This map shows you job change year over, September of 2019 to September of 2020. And you can see that Utah, while contracting, has the second smallest contraction of any state. And it's at that 0.9%. Look at the US contracting by over 6%. So, you know, sometimes if you're contracting by twice as much or 3 times as much, but you can see the very significant difference between our national counterparts in Utah. Our unemployment rate mirrors what you see in job change. The unemployment rate went up very high, over 10%. We've now worked it down to 5%. We'll get new numbers tomorrow. The state's goal is to try and get that to below 4.5%. So we've got a ways to go, but we're faring better than most states. I mentioned that this recession's been uneven. That's happened in a lot of areas. It's uneven by socioeconomic, it's uneven by county here, geography. It's uneven by race, ethnicity. It's uneven by occupation. So it really is affecting some more than others. Hence, you get the title, the K-shaped recovery. We can talk more about that. But here you see in dark red, the counties in the state with the highest unemployment rate, very much an Eastern Utah phenomenon. This is the oil and gas industry, so energy. It's tourism in Moab and Grand County. In Garfield County, it's tourism as well, a very tourism-dependent county that's been impacted by the lack of travel. I think it's really interesting to look at unemployment claims. I'll show you 2 ways of looking at that. This is new initial claims in Utah. You can see they got as high as 33,000 and have now been really moving sideways for some time at about 4,000 a week. This red line is the average in 2019. Average weekly claims were just over 1,000 per week. So we're 4 times that still. And that helps you see that we still have you know, some real challenges in the economy. This is the aggregation of ongoing weekly claims in Utah. So where do they stand today? And we've been working this down, but again, at about 30,000 ongoing weekly claims means they're staying on the rolls of the unemployed. And that would have been about 8,800 in 2019. So this is still economy that is very much working its way out of a downturn. It's going to be a slow and steady recovery. One of the things interesting that we're doing now is measuring consumer confidence in Utah. This has not been done in our state in a statistically valid, ongoing way. The legislature's asked for that, so we are now surveying that. I just wanted you to see how in Utah we do view the economy in a more favorable light. Red is Utah here, the gray is the US. Over on the left, it's basically, we ask the question, are you better off financially today than a year ago? The University of Michigan also asked that nationally, so we ask the same questions, but in Utah. You can see that we think we're, the percent favorable is higher in Utah for the question of are you better off today than a year ago? What about looking forward? Do you think you'd be better off financially a year from now? Still, you know, the percent favorable higher than the nation. And then we ask about business conditions in the country in the next 12 months, in the next 5 years. And then we also ask, what about business conditions in Utah over the next 12 months? You can see how much better we view ourselves than we view the nation. So something really interesting, we only have 1 month of data so far in this, but this will be an ongoing survey that we'll be able to track. A big part of the unevenness is also by industry. And that really comes out clearly on this graph where you see the major industries in our state. You can see the state economy is still contracting by 0.9%. But look at the leisure and hospitality sector at a minus 15.7 after 8 months of working through this, still having those kinds of contractions. And then the natural resource industry at 11.6. I'll say the real bright spot is the construction sector growing at 6.6%. That's a large sector, a sector that has a high multiplier effect, a sector that pays high wages, and of course, a sector that's really important to commercial real estate. So it's really the brightest spot of the Utah economy right now is the construction sector. Other services has a lot of things mixed in there. Hard to kind of summarize or characterize that, but one of the things we do have in other services is temporary jobs, temp help, and so you see those in downturns. Well, so that's the economic situation as I see it. I want to go to Utah's economic response, and this is information that may not be as apparent to many on the call that I think you'll enjoy learning about. So the insights I want to share here is that Utah's response has really been incredible. It's been large, swift, nimble, targeted. The federal stimulus we received is unprecedented. The aid has been targeted, which I think is a very positive thing in public policy. And we've been retraining thousands of Utahns so that they have a way forward in this changed economy. So here's how the federal stimulus breaks down. I'll invite you to look at these numbers. We've received $12.7 billion in federal aid. And that is 22% of Utah's gross domestic product in the second quarter of 2020. So that's just a phenomenal injection. Just to give you a sense of scale, during the Great Recession, we had the ARA, if you remember the Economic Recovery Act for the Great Recession. It totaled around $3.3 billion, if my memory serves me right. So we're talking 4 times that amount coming into Utah. This is the Paycheck Protection Program that helped with businesses. This is traditional and enhanced unemployment. You remember the additional $600 per week that was being provided. That tallied $1.6 billion in Utah. This is the Coronavirus Relief Fund that's been used to prop up state and local governments all around Utah. This is the payments that went directly to individuals. $2.6 billion of federal money came into Utah households to pay rent, to buy food, to buy down debt, whatever they wanted to do with it. They increased the federal Medicaid match. So you see the $141 million there, disaster loans, and this is hospital provider relief funds. So this is really incredible. And if you can see how that played out, here's the timing of it. So you see all that money comes in. It doesn't mean it was all spent in April, but it came in there, and then it's spent over the months. But what's really important for all of us to remember is that that's pretty much gone. Like the enhanced unemployment is gone. Those paycheck protection monies, most have all been used. And so we're now sort of on our own. And that's why the real question becomes, will there be another federal stimulus? I think it's also interesting to note how much support has come from the state in terms of CARES Act. And so this is still mostly federal money, but I hope most of you are familiar with these programs, small business loan programs, commercial rental assistance, which could also be used for mortgages. The Learn and Work in Utah, this is retraining funds. Shop in Utah, this helped with small businesses, gave them monies that they could use to subsidize and support their businesses. I won't go through all these, but you get a sense, $170 million directed specifically to tourism, oil and gas industries that have been hard hit. On the economic response, I'll just briefly say that the Salt Lake Chamber has done a yeoman's job in helping businesses to stay safe, to stay open. They've reached out to over 21,000 businesses, and we've had, I hear it's now over 8,000 that have taken the Stay Safe to Stay Open pledge. Really important. We need to keep our businesses open. And then the retraining that's occurred, 160 programs approved for $15 million. This is basically tuition support, program development support, so we can rapidly retrain and upskill workers in our state. So that's a real rapid summary of the economic response. But again, I'm very proud of what our state's done, and it really does show up in the numbers. So the outlook looks something like this. I think the economic pain and volatility is going to continue because we have so much uncertainty. And this is really going to be more of a slow and steady path to recovery. This isn't a V-shaped recovery. The biggest concern are the individuals and businesses hard hit. So this is the lower part of the K-shaped recovery. Vaccines are on their way, and I'm going to show you my thinking there, but we have to bridge the gap until we have the vaccine. So we still got a lot more we need to do. Until we have a vaccine, the most important thing we can do is continue to follow public health guidelines. There is an absolute connection between case counts and economic confidence and engagement in the economy. So we need to do what we can to get on top of case counts. And then we do have an opportunity to reimagine our future because this is very much a reset. So just to put a little finer numbers on that, and this is a graphic that not many people have seen, so I'll invite you to kind of look at this. But it basically gives you insight into Utah's vaccine timeline. Phase 1, which starts right now through the end of the year, very limited vaccines that will be used for high priority areas. You'll see the healthcare staff, long-term care facilities, high-risk populations, but you'll also see some really important workers, teachers, childcare staff. There's more to the state plan, and I know that Governor Herbert will be announcing the details here, but this happens through the end of the year. Then what happens in first and second quarter, you continue to vaccinate those that we didn't get in phase 1, but then you start adding other important entities that are targeted. And then as we move into the second quarter, so now we're in sort of the April, May timeframe, we move towards the entire population. We know that this will be voluntary. And so, there'll be the issues of who's willing, but hopefully because of the data we're seeing that there will be a lot of uptake. And I've just got these colored bars up here showing that what we're trying to do is bridge the gap till we have a vaccine. So we got to keep building business confidence. We got to keep training workers for this changed economy. We got to keep having businesses adapt and consumers adapt. Lou mentioned plan, pivot, adapt. That has to happen as we bridge towards this. And it's my hope, and I put a question mark on it, but it's my hope that we'll get additional federal stimulus. I believe it is needed. I don't like borrowing more money, but I think this is a time when it's the costs of not borrowing are greater than the cost of borrowing. So the outlook looks something like this. This is kind of hard to get your head around. Maybe I shouldn't even show this, but this is personal income, jobs, unemployment, wages, and taxable sales. The gray is 2019. The reason maybe I shouldn't show it is it's really complicated because it makes it look like 2020 is a good year when you see personal income grow like that. That's because of all the transfer payments that came into the federal money. We got 20% plus of our GDP just given to us. But you can see the job count, that the year ends up with a minus 2% contraction. But you can see that we think 2021 will get back up to 3.8. Unemployment, we're forecasting 4%. Wage, 4%. Again, this wage looks artificially high here, the increase, because so many low wage jobs went away. And you can see taxable sales there. The last thing I'll share, and this is just some really interesting data, then I can go back to Lou for some questions, but the University of Utah has done some really interesting work on mask wearing. And this is COVID-19 case counts nationally. We looked at all the places, every county in the country where there's a mask mandate, and essentially lined them up to 0. And then we showed days forward. And we show that after the mask mandate, you can see that case counts in general fall, okay? So then we start saying, well, what happens to the economy as you have that mask mandate? And interestingly, looking at the Google mobility data, we see that mobility increases with mask wearing. So I would interpret that, we don't know because it's just data, but I would interpret that to say that people feel more confident and engage more in the economy when mask wearing occurs. And keep in mind that this isn't just a time series of what we're seeing. This is where we're looking at, we're comparing the mobility of counties with mask orders relative to those without. So we're looking for a difference effect. And then here, that we also see that spending increases with mask wearing. Here we're looking at credit card spending data. And so what's so magnificent about this data, even though it's more academic in how it's thought of, is that we get both lower case counts, so better health, and we get better economic activity with mask wearing. So these are my conclusions, and then Lou, I'll turn it to you for questions. If you've had frustrations about things that state leaders have done, that business leaders have done, that our federal government's done, I just remind you, Secretary Mike Leavitt said to me, nobody looks good in a pandemic. It is super complicated. I do believe government is limited in what it can do, and it really falls upon our shoulders. Utah's response has been extensive, but we're still struggling. We have to keep adapting and refining our plans because this has not been easy. I do believe another federal stimulus will soften the pain, and I think it would be, I just think our state leaders need to help make that happen. masks are a huge part of the health and economic solution. And this is just Natalie. I don't have insights here, but I think we should expect a statewide mask mandate to continue until we get case counts under 400. That's the state's goal. And, you know, we're averaging around 3,000 a day right now. I think that my guess is we'll continue to have a mask mandate till the end of the year. And then because this virus is so hard on so many people, for those of us that have not been as severely impacted, we've got to find ways to help those in need, because there is a large and growing share of Utahns that are really suffering through this. Lou, I'd like to end on a positive note, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and go back to you. You are always so positive, and let's spend 10 minutes or so having a dialogue about what I shared. Happy to share anything that you think would be helpful.
Thank you, Natalie. As always, it's delightful to have those insights. And we appreciate the broad-based approach that you have to it. How about a question about our new administration? You're on a key member of Governor-elect Cox's transition team. Do you see some kind of changes going forward? Or on the economic side, there was some articles today in the paper about a new economic development approach with the legislature. That's the question, and I think you would already have answered this. Governor Herbert always used to say, if Utah were a stock, I'd buy it, and that's certainly how I feel even after you're with the numbers, in particular with the future going forward. So if you'd give us some ideas about the transition and maybe the overall optimistic opportunity for the new year.
Yeah, happy to do that, Lou. So the governor-elect, Spencer Cox, really an amazing story to have a person who comes from Fairview, Utah, who is really those strong rural roots, but made his way up in state government to the point where he could be the lieutenant governor and then become governor-elect. I'll share an interesting factoid. Governor Herbert is the second longest serving governor in our state's history. Before, a couple of months ago, Mike Leavitt held that distinction, but Cal Rampton was our longest serving. He completed 3 complete terms, but then it's Governor Herbert. And if you think about it, it was Huntsman who resigned and then to Herbert. So really no transition. It was just an overnight light switch and you just kind of accept the same people. I mean, I'm sure right. Governor Herbert did an optimization commission and things, but this is the first time in many, many years that state governments had a refresh. And what I'm seeing the governor-elect do is he is letting a fresh thinking wash over state government. State government is a large employer in our states, obviously very important to infrastructure and to education and all these things that are so important to the economy. So what I would tell people to expect is I would expect changes. I would expect some efficiency moves, some quality moves, and importantly, I'm going to call him a Generation Xer taking over the governor's seat. So you've had a baby boomer in there, and now we're bringing the sensibilities of a different generation. And overall, I think it'll be terrific for our state. On your other question, Lou, about buying stock, if it was Utah, I got a call from the editor of a national journal called American Affairs. He said, Natalie, you lead an important policy institute. We're impressed with what's going on in Utah. Would you submit an article on Utah's economic exceptionalism? And I was like, well, of course, I'd love to do that. And that will be published, I guess, later this month. But yes, on almost every economic metric, Utah's either #1 or in the top 3. And I can't share the number right now, but I do have insights into what net migration is to our state, and it will be positive and large again this year. That tells you something when people are still moving here during a pandemic. So Lou, I'm very positive about Utah. The economist in me wants to remind people that it's going to take some time. There's been so much damage done by this pandemic to occupations, to businesses, and so it's going to take some time.
Well, that's true. And by comparison to other states, we are in the commercial real estate world daily getting calls from the coasts saying, what's up in Utah? We like the opportunities that are there. And it's intriguing. I have long thought that we live in the best part of the best state in the best country on the planet. And we're so blessed to have this. And I think that's now being reflected by the multifamily growth. Maybe you could say a word about the affordable housing, because the Institute did a beautiful report this last week beautiful in its candor and insightfulness about our homeless issue and what the affordable housing issues may reflect around that issue as well.
Okay, yeah. You know, if I were to pick the top 3 issues that we've got to pay attention to and you know, really get on top of, one would be growth, one would be affordable housing, they're all related, and the third would be homeless services. And when I say growth, I'm meaning infrastructure investment and all the things that are attentive to maintaining quality in our state. Those of you that are interested, go to gardner.utah.edu and you'll see a great report that our senior fellow for housing construction and real estate just authored, Jim Wood. It's on best practices in affordable housing. And he not only did a report on it, but he did a separate little piece that was just his personal reflections about it. And I think people will find it very interesting. Affordable housing is so hard to get on top of. When you have these growth pressures, so you have all this demand that pushes up prices. And then when you have supply constraints, whether it's the decisions made by local government on land use, whether it's hard to find land supplies in places where people want to develop, whether you have the constraints for materials, you know, in a pandemic where supply chains aren't what they once were. So affordable housing is going to continue to be a huge challenge to our state. And on the homeless services, the comment I'd make there is watch for the state to make changes. We invested mightily in these homeless resource centers. They're terrific, but they're very expensive. And so we've got to create a stronger leadership structure that puts more efficiencies and less overlap in the system. So that's what I would predict.
Well, thank you for that wisdom. We are so grateful for the Kem C. Gardner Institute for all the support and ideas that take place. There have been a few times when I've come back after some meetings to talk to my colleagues at Colliers, and they say, they ask me a question about tax, whatever it is, and I'll give them, you know, my best attempt. And they say, no, we want to know what Natalie says about it. No last name, just what does Natalie say about it? That's what counts. And Natalie, we thank you so much what you have said. There is a new book out called entitled "Next Year at This Time We'll All Be Laughing." I don't know if we'll be that far along, but excuse me, I hope we'll at least be smiling because we're in Utah and because we've had this wisdom and the leadership that's going to make, whether it's affordable housing or leisure coming back or whatever the transport issues may be. We are grateful for the leadership that you're showing. And trust me, there are hundreds of people on this call right now, and we stand ready to listen, learn, so we can prepare, as we said at the outset, to plan, pivot, and adapt together. So Natalie, as my fellow UDOT commissioner and as friend of so many years, thank you so much for this. We look forward to a great 2021, given the foundation that you're helping lay at the Institute. So with that, thank you, Natalie. You are a natural resource that we are very grateful for. I will now have the pleasure of turning the time over for the next 30-minute segment to our esteemed chairman, Mr. Brandon Fugel, a man who needs no introduction because if you drive down I-15, it's otherwise known as Brandon Fugel Boulevard, if you see the signs, and he will have the pleasure of talking with Alan Matheson about Point of the Mountain. Thank you again, Natalie. Thank you all.
Welcome, everyone, and we're pleased to have you with this incredible Elevate conference joining us. We are going to kick off this next section of our conference with an incredible and insightful view of the Point of the Mountain development project. And we'll kick this off with a video provided by Alan Matheson, who we'll be introducing shortly.
Most people in the state know that the existing correctional facility at the Point of the Mountain is going to be moved, which means that this land is going to be available for development. That area will be known as the Point.
The new prison is expected to be completed in mid-2022. At that point, we'll start looking at demolition of the site and site preparation for development.
There's really not much like this anywhere in the world, where you have 700 acres located in a densely populated area in the heart of Silicon Slopes. This is unlike anything we've seen in the history of the state of Utah, and a rare opportunity in the United States or anywhere in the world.
We have one of the most vibrant technology scenes in the country, maybe even the world. The epicenter of Utah's Silicon Slopes is really at that prison site. And so we'll have the opportunity to have this blank slate that can be programmed to help accelerate additional growth, additional opportunity, so that we can see a major campus form there, a campus that's environmentally sustainable, that is focused and centered around research and innovation, that is a job center, that allows people who live and work in the site to access the beautiful outdoors that we have here in the state of Utah.
Our approach has been to think big. The point will be impressive. This will be a unique place for innovation, for technology, for research, and vibrant growth with an eye towards quality of life, transportation, air quality.
This will be a place that is not just about corporations or buildings. It's about community. It's about people. There will be some residential and commercial. Certainly, we think it's important to have recreation and open space.
We want to make sure that future generations look back on what we did here and they can be proud of those decisions, making sure that it doesn't impact traffic negatively, that it doesn't impact air quality negatively, that this can actually be a model for future development so that we can add people without lowering the quality of life and diminishing what makes the state the best place to live, work, and play.
The reality is that we're not going to be able to stop growth, but we can grow in ways that preserve what we value most. That's our commitment at this site.
The people of Utah want this to be a very sustainable development that draws on the best technology. It could be a showcase piece for our entire country. It will create new educational opportunities, new employment opportunities, and it will only enhance the quality of life here.
We don't have a plan for this site yet. We want it to be open to the public so they can see what we're doing and have input into the process. Tell us what works, what doesn't, how we can improve it.
The dream is that this will be something that is unique and something that every Utahn can be proud of.
We would rather be right than fast on this project. The citizens are part of this decision-making process. It's not just the governor or the legislature. It really is everyone working together to make this the best project it can possibly be, to show the world that that entrepreneurial spirit of Utah, people coming together, still exists, and it's something we're very proud of and can't wait to complete.
The 700-acre site at the point of the mountain is arguably the most strategic assemblage in the United States right now. And we're pleased to be joined by Alan Matheson, the Executive Director of the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority, to help speak and shed light on that planning process. Alan is the former Executive Director of the Utah Department of Environmental Quality and Envision Utah, has a legal background with a law degree from UCLA and undergraduate from Stanford. We're pleased to welcome Alan and turn the time over to him to give us a brief overview, and we'll be asking and answering questions for this next segment. Alan.
Well, thank you, Brian, and I appreciate that. Appreciate the introduction, and I'm really excited to be here with this group. Colliers is doing great things. It's great to be with a number of real estate professionals from the state. And as I begin, I acknowledge that you know far more about this world than I do. And so I'm going to be relying on many of you to help us as we move ahead. But we do see this as a remarkable opportunity, kind of a blank slate that will be available in roughly 2 years. And with that great opportunity comes significant responsibility. And we feel heavy the responsibility to make sure that we develop this area in a way that benefits all people in the state. This is a statewide project. And we feel that we've got an obligation to provide a return to the citizens of this state. And that return is certainly economic, but it's also quality of life. So as we move ahead, we're drawing on input from past years as well as planned input in the future. And we want this to be a community project, something that we can be proud of for years to come and that can benefit generations of Utah.
Where are we at in the planning process right now, Alan? Can you give us a status update?
Yeah, and you know, a little background, we've kind of done some public outreach through the Point of the Mountain Development Commission. We've done some public surveys, and we've involved to this point over 7,000 people in the state. A lot of technical working groups that have been busy and have kind of a vision for the area, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But we're really transitioning right now from visioning to planning, and we're seeking some help in doing that. I recently hired a planning director, a consultant who's got 40 years in the business, was formerly the executive vice president of the Irvine Company, oversaw their redevelopment of 19,000 acres, all the planning for that. He's been involved internationally in a number of master planning efforts. So he's providing some nice wisdom to me and to our team. We've also opened up a solicitation to engage a planning team to help us develop a framework master plan. We had, I guess we issued that in September. We had 12 firms that applied, and they're kind of who's who. You'd recognize the names, they're internationally known. Then we've gone through this difficult task of kind of narrowing the field. And after interviews and reviews, we've got 3 finalists now. They're going through a competitive process, pretty rigorous process to develop some initial ideas and visions and plans for the site. We hope to select the firm and get them under contract by the end of this calendar year. And then the goal is they'll start working on a framework master plan at the beginning of next year, with the goal of having a framework master plan in place by the end of June next summer.
Are there going to be opportunities for public input throughout this process?
There certainly will. And, as I said, public input's been a big part of this. This is a public project, and so we feel that it needs to have a lot of input. We've had significant public input, thousands of people, but as we start the master planning process, we kind of look at roughly 4 or 5 phases. First will be information gathering, reaching out to stakeholders and key people in our community. Then they'll be developing scenarios about how this area can develop. Then we'll focus on a preferred scenario, refine that, and kind of develop this framework master plan with guiding principles for development in the future. At each step in that process, we're asking this planning team to bring in public comment and help refine their thinking and provide ideas. So this is going to be a real iterative process as we go forward.
So as we're grappling with growth and continued density in our population, especially with this piece of property being so strategic to the Wasatch Front, how is transportation aligning with the land planning process that you're going through, and how do you envision that being addressed?
I've talked to thousands of people about this project, and the vast majority are really excited about it, but the vast majority are also concerned particularly about traffic. And we've got this site that's in a narrow neck of land between 2 fast-growing counties. And by 2050, I think the projection is we'll have about 1.5 million people in each of Salt Lake and Utah counties, all trying to get through that narrow neck of land. So what do we do to ensure that we've still got good transportation under those circumstances? One of the things that we're doing is trying to develop a site that can be as self-sufficient as possible, a good balance of jobs and housing so that those that reside there can work there and vice versa, trying to minimize trip generation off-site and use that as a model for other development in the area. But we also know we're going to need infrastructure, and UDOT is working on some parallel roads. UTA is working on extending transit from the point of the mountain area through our site, the point, down into Utah County. And in fact, we're in kind of the phase of identifying a locally preferred alternative for that transit that's looking at the route and the appropriate mode. I think that'll be decided in the next month or so. Right now, they're looking at kind of what they're calling a common ground alternative that would go from the Draper Front Runner Station down through the point, across I-15 to the east side, and then down into Utah County, Traverse Ridge area, and beyond, and then connect to planned transit in Utah County that would go down into the Orem and Provo area. So it's exciting. We need to figure out how we're going to pay for it, but the real emphasis among all of the communities and stakeholders is we needed it years ago. Let's move and get it done.
Right. Are there other national models that you've seen, other projects of this size, scale that have provided at least a good reference point for you and the team as you have been going through this process?
You know, we've got RCLCO working as a consultant for us, helping us work through the market analysis. And one of the things that they've done is look at analogs. Analogs both in terms of size and type of development, but also we've got a real interest in developing this site as an innovation district, a place where we can generate research, commercialize it, start new small Utah businesses, and make them big Utah businesses. So we've been looking at places that have an innovation element to them. And frankly, there's not a great model. We can't point to one development and say, that's what we're looking at. But there's some that I think are really instructive. One is Lake Nona Medical District in the Orlando area. There's a development called Novus in Tempe, Arizona, where I used to serve on the planning commission down there. And they've got a partnership with Arizona State University and the community to build mixed use innovation community right next to the university, which is kind of exciting. We've been looking at Anschutz in Colorado. It's kind of a medical innovation, biotech innovation community with clinical hospitals. Cortex is a project in St. Louis where they were concerned about loss of economic development in the Midwest. And a number of years ago started a project to bring in innovation and generate new companies. And that's been pretty successful. So these and others, we're taking lessons learned, both good and bad, and trying to avoid the bad and advance the good.
Well, you have a daunting task before you. Have you encountered any unique challenges that were not anticipated months ago, especially as we've been dealing with COVID and the pandemic?
You know, you're right. This is a challenging project, and it's getting a lot of public scrutiny, as it should. But you might imagine that there are lots of different ideas about what ought to happen here. And we recently wrapped up a public survey that was essentially trying to check whether the public goals, visions, principles that came out of the process in 2018 still apply. And one of the things we learned is that, you know, there are as many different ideas as there are people. So one of the challenges is going to be meeting the directives that we received from the legislature and from the public recognizing that we're not going to make everybody happy. Now, many in the public said that they want this to be Central Park, a big open area where they can go and recreate and play. Certainly, there's got to be an element of that. We want to create a place that's appealing, that will attract the best talent for economic development, that will be an amenity, a quality of life benefit for people in the region. But it's going to have to be balanced with economic development activity so that we can pay for it and generate the revenues that we hope to generate for education, social services, and infrastructure, other things that we care about. So that's going to be a challenge. I will step back for a second and say the public identified a number of principles. Interestingly, the legislature incorporated those principles in the statute that created the authority as our directives. And they include job creation, workforce development, world-class transportation, quality of life in the region, trying to have a balance of jobs and housing, recreation, regional trails, and nationally recognized research center. You put all of those together, and some of those are competing. The real challenge, I think, for us is to find the right balance that meets the legislature's directive, the public interest, and actually works in the market. It's easy to come up with vision and big ideas. The challenge now is to make sure we do something that is viable and real and will work.
You know, we here at Colliers are receiving a lot of inquiries right now from large corporate occupiers, investors, and other parties from across the country and even internationally that are identifying Utah as a key market for expansion and relocation for the future. Are you seeing activity and interest from outside of Utah at this early stage of your planning process at the point of the mountain? And how do you anticipate responding to some of those inquiries and navigating that landscape as you make preparations moving into 2021?
Yeah, that's a big deal. And we haven't actively started recruiting yet, but yes, we're getting interest from within the state and outside of the state. Maybe I'll just step back and say one of the things that we've done recently is create 5 working groups. They deal in areas such as air quality and environment, research, innovation, education, innovation is a big part of it. We've got one looking at infrastructure and land use, transportation, those issues. So we've had experts that have been diving into the detail to create kind of key vision elements for this site. I mentioned that one of those is really focusing on economic development, recruitment, and investment. And many of those have contacts outside of the state with some of the top companies in the world. And in informal conversations, there's been a lot of interest from among those companies. The challenge for us is deciding, who goes there and where. And to do that, we need to develop some criteria that we'll use. So that this is not arbitrary. It's not just first come, first served, but it's based on advancing those goals and principles that the legislature and the public have outlined. So we expect that once we have, I'll say this, I mentioned that we're working on this framework master plan. That'll be kind of the bones of the infrastructure for this site, outlining the sectors that we expect to see there, the types of development, land uses based on the land use program that has been developed. And all of that's going to be helpful. But in parallel, we want to continue to have conversations with folks that may want to locate there so that we're taking their input, building the kind of place that would be appealing to some of the top companies in the world.
There are some tremendous bookends to the point of the mountain development that have emerged over the course of the last year or two. You have Adobe's expansion. You also have Pluralsight with their new 350,000 square foot campus. You also have the fastest growing company in the state, Acima Credit, who just moved into their new headquarters down the street there in Draper as well. So there's so much momentum in that area, and I think the perfect storm of economic development opportunities emerging. What are some of the challenges that you're facing with trying to address the land use and the master planning, and how are you directing the architects and the planners that are responding to the request for proposal? What unique challenges are you faced with and asking them to address?
Well, maybe I'll, if I can, let me share my screen quickly, and I'll give you a little insight here. I mentioned those working groups, and over the course of like July and August, they worked on identifying some key vision elements. These are concepts that we built into the solicitation process and are specifically scoring the planning firms on their ability to address these issues. Give you, maybe a little more detail into the kind of vision we have. And you can see that first is dealing with placemaking, having a vibrant mixed-use community, looking at quality of life and health. I mentioned that balance of jobs and housing to limit off-site trips. We want this to be a place that is active and draws people, that where there will be some nightlife and activity on the weekends. The second is focusing on transportation, and we talked a lot about that. Transportation needs to take many forms, and one of those is active transportation. So we're working very closely with surrounding communities and the transportation agencies to see if we can encourage active transportation, allowing people to commute on bicycle and other non-motorized means. We're also really focusing on the future and looking at things like autonomous electric circulators. It might be charged with coils in the pavement. Utah State University is a leader in this. That means you don't have to go and charge those vehicles by plugging them in. They charge as they drive. So batteries can be smaller and they can be more flexible. The third is this economic development piece, creating jobs and revenues. And really that's about creating a place that attracts the best talent and making sure that key anchor tech companies nationally and locally locate there. I mentioned this emphasis on innovation, and it's really about creating a place where the best talent wants to be, has the resources they need, and then have opportunities for collaboration with other smart people, largely maybe from different disciplines. And so we're looking at ways that through placemaking, through programming, through makerspace, incubators, accelerators, venture capital, and mature companies, we can create the kind of place with our higher education institutions that will spur economic opportunities, not just at this site, but throughout the state. Sustainability is a big deal, and that's in our statute. It's very much on the minds of the public. So we're looking at ways to use less water and energy to improve air quality, generate fewer greenhouse gases, maybe make this a net zero community that could be a model for sustainable development in other parts of the state. And then finally, and this fits maybe with where you're going, Brandon, it's about coordinating with the region. If we look just at this 600-acre site, we're going to miss opportunities and create some problems. So we want this to be a regional benefit. We're planning with the communities and the counties and the transportation agencies in the region, and want to make sure that we're creating a place that can benefit surrounding areas every bit as much as we benefit this spot.
Fantastic. Well, I think the entire Wasatch Front will end up being the beneficiary of your planning and the vision that will go into this project. I look at the surrounding communities in the Wasatch Front in general, and the momentum that will be created with this project, I believe, will elevate all of the surrounding communities. A lot of people ask, well, should other competing municipalities or areas of the Wasatch Front be concerned that the Point of the Mountain project will suck all of the oxygen out of the area? And my opinion has been that it will only elevate all of the communities and drive more positive economic growth and activity, and that all boats will rise with the tide, if you will. And I think you've employed a similar approach with your master planning and how you're approaching this process with the Point of the Mountain State Land Authority. Is there anything that you'd like to direct as far as public input? Is there a website that you have or a place where people can get more information as this project unfolds?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have a website. It's thepointutah.org. So thepointutah.org. And it'll give you some background on where we are and what we're doing. We've tried to be open and transparent, knowing that this is a public project. So every one of our board meetings, every one of our working group meetings is recorded and can be accessed on that site. Anybody can go in and watch our board meetings the second Tuesday of each month. We're also distributing monthly newsletters that give updates on where we are, and you can sign up for those on the website. We will be reaching out, as I said, to the public for input as we get into the planning process. This has to be a community project. I'm telling you, if I develop it and plan it, it's not going to work. If our board does, it's not going to work. This has to be all of us working together for something that's going to benefit our state long term. And that's what this is about. It's not trying to benefit a few. Our number one guiding principle is that we're going to promote the public interest. And so no favorites here. We're trying to do our best to make sure that long term our succeeding generations have better lives, better careers because of what we do here.
Great. Well, we appreciate your efforts. Thank you so much for participating in today's conference, Alan, and for all that you are doing to help position the state for future success. Well, we'll turn to our next section of this Elevate conference, and I'm pleased to be introducing our Chief Operating Officer and Director of Special Projects with Colliers Corporate, Adam Long, who will be overseeing the panel discussion that will proceed. And so I'll invite everyone to crack open another Diet Mountain Dew, which, as we all know, is simply carbonated water and orange juice. And stay tuned for some real special market insight from the leading experts addressing all segments of the market. Thank you, Adam.
Hello, and I want to thank everyone who's joining us remotely today. To wrap up our symposium, what we've decided to do is actually the favorite aspect of my job, which is getting to get insights from the top producing brokers who are down in the trenches and actually seeing what is going on in the market today. And we're in a time right now where there's a lot of disruption and uncertainty, And we hope that this panel will, give us some additional insights and help us see a little better what we've seen to date and what we might expect here in the coming year. We brought together a group of 5 panelists today from the leading brokers in different specialties here at Colliers. So what I will do is just quickly introduce them by name, and then we'll end up turning the time over to them to give a quick introduction. And since it's been such an interesting time over the past 9 months, I think I'd ask you to give a quick introduction and also maybe share the most unique moment that has happened in your real estate world over the last 9 months. So first we'll go from left to right here in person. To start, we have Laura Munson, who specializes in office, Raleigh Nielsen from our investment division, Stu Thane with retail, and Jared Hunt, who is an industrial specialist, as well as one of the anchors of our Pleasant Grove office down in Utah County. And then due to quarantining, which all of us have been, I'm sure, experiencing at some point over the last 9 months, one of our panelists, Ryan Flint, who is a generalist that crosses between industrial and office and really specializes in Davis and Weber counties, will be actually joining us remotely today. So let's start. Laura, maybe you want to start the introductions and we'll go across the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I specialize in tenant representation and in particular in office properties. So that's my specialty. And I'd say one of the most unique things, which is going to turn out to be not unique at all, is just how quickly everything kind of came to a grinding halt. We had several large corporate headquarters build-to-suit transactions in the works that were just immediately put on hold. Everyone went to work from home model, and by and far, it has worked extremely well for most of my clients. And I think that has been a shock to them. So it's unique how quickly everything stopped, but I think it's given them a great chance to kind of pivot and learn how to implement this new policy. And now what we're seeing is now they're starting to look at saying, okay, we look forward to getting back into the office, and it's going to look different than what we thought a year ago, but we're still going to go back and we're going to take the things that we've learned from this last 9 months and implement those things, and we're going to be even better for it.
Raleigh.
So my name is Raleigh Nielsen. I'm the president of investment sales here for Colliers Utah. My team and I focus primarily on multifamily sales as well as office buildings along the Wasatch Front. I don't have one unique experience from this year. There are many unique experiences, but overall I would sum it up that I've been blown away by the level of sales activity in the past 5 months. I've been in this business since 2003, and I think the last 4 months have been the busiest of my career. So I wouldn't have thought that in March and April. So it's been unique to see just the level of sales activity in the state.
Thank you, Raleigh. Stu?
I'm Stuart Thane, and I'm just happy to be here. I do retail projects, tenant representation, landlord representation. It's been an interesting time, but we've also talked with the retail group here at Colliers on how busy we really are during this time frame. I think April and May were tough, and then all of a sudden something happened, and it's been interesting. Like the other panelists have said, for my most unique thing, I've never done this before, but we had a national tenant that wanted to be in a certain location, and we start to finish executed a lease in less than 7 days. And I've never seen that, never done that before, and I'll probably never do it again. But just because of the pandemic, everything lined up and they were able to get a deal done. And it's surprising me during this time frame on retailers on what they're willing to do and what they can do during this in order to still make deals. And it's been great, and we'll continue to do so. I hope so, as we chat and on some of these other questions. So,
Jared.
Yeah, Jared Hunt. I work out of the Pleasant Grove office, as Adam has mentioned, specializing in industrial real estate, which is warehouses and manufacturing plants. March was kind of an interesting month. Everybody were scratching their heads wondering what's next, but then it quickly picked back up again. This has been a very busy year for us. As companies have looked at their supply chains, looked at their vulnerabilities and where their inventory was at, and in a response to e-commerce, watching sales grow rapidly. Most of my clients don't have the luxury of a work from home option because they are actually needing to be in the facility doing the work in order for things to move forward. So we've had to make accommodations the best we could. An interesting, I guess if I were to say one thing that was interesting this year that will probably never be repeated is sitting at my desk watching guys walk in with respirators and Tyvek suits to disinfect the office, looking up and wondering, what world am I living in? And so it has been interesting to make those adaptations to become more sensitive to germs and spreading of viruses and so forth.
Thank you, Jared. Let's turn it to Ryan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me and being patient with me being remote. My name is Ryan Flint and I'm the president of Northern Utah at Colliers. And I'm like with Stu, I'm just grateful to be here and be a part of this awesome event. What we specialize is almost everything. We've got a team with members that do office, industrial. We do a lot of new development and land. And something unique that we've experienced this year, kind of being on our own little totem pole up there, is how to pivot and how to better ourselves within and study the market. This is all really new for us because we're young and we weren't a part of the 2008 transition and downturn. And so we have had a little bit of a learning curve during this time, and it's suited us really well. So again, grateful to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Ryan. This entire group here of our top producers, we were actually all in Kauai, Hawaii back in March with our top producer recognition trip, when basically it seemed like the whole world started falling apart very quickly. COVID didn't become very real to me until they canceled March Madness, and I wasn't going to get to see BYU make their run. And that happened while we were in Hawaii, and I think it was interesting talking to a lot of you. It was a giant open question at that point of how bad is this going to get, right? We all started to do our contingency planning and start working with our clients to figure out what we might need to do to get through this. So the first question I'd kind of like to pose to our group is, with all of this disruption, where is the floor? Have we already seen it? Are we past the worst of it and now we're just moving forward? Or is there maybe another bump that you foresee coming? Raleigh, do you want to start that off from the investment perspective?
Yeah, and I don't know if I could call what we've seen in the Utah sales space, especially multifamily, a floor. There was definitely a hiccup in March and April. Buyers kind of retreated to the sideline for a little bit, but they started coming back out in May, and they've been investing in full force since then. We had very little adjustment to pricing after COVID, especially in apartment buildings. We'd get buyers asking us for price adjustments or post-COVID pricing, they would say, and we would kind of laugh, our sellers would laugh, and there would be no discount. And since then in apartments, it's actually post-COVID means a premium. We're seeing over asking price. We're seeing large amounts of hard money day one on apartment deals. In the data that we track, the January through October period of this year versus the same period in 2019, we've seen higher dollar volume in sales, more transactions, lower cap rates, and higher price per square foot on sales. So it's hard to say floor. Maybe the floor was 2019 if you look at it like that. Pricing is more aggressive. There's more money in the market. Office and other product types, we definitely saw some hiccups in pricing, a lot less transactions. But that was more because sellers didn't need to meet where that market was in the summer when everyone wanted a deal. Sellers weren't desperate. They didn't have to sell. Tenants were still paying rent for the most part. So landlords are just writing that out and either coming back on the market now or waiting to see what happens next year.
So do you think that will continue into next year? Do you think we're going to continue to see growth in investments?
I do. And I think the investment space is unique because there are such large amounts of private and institutional capital out there wanting to get into the state of Utah, that even with the pandemic, even with huge job losses across the country, that money needs to find a home. They want a safe home, and Utah has proven to be one of the top destinations for that money.
Jared, what have you been seeing in industrial and down Utah County?
Really the same thing that Raleigh has been seeing. We saw early on some investment sales start to put some pressure on price adjustments or retrades. Those did not happen. And we've since seen uptick in demand. We've had a very active third quarter in terms of investment inquiries. We've got properties under contract with out-of-state groups that are coming in and essentially paying full price. And so with the cost of capital going down, the attractive, safe alternatives being limited, real estate is still rising to the top as the number one place to place money. And similar to Raleigh's experience, we've had really only one tenant default in all the properties that I'm involved with this past year, to the point that the lease was terminated. Nearly all of our tenants are paying as stipulated in the lease. It's been a struggle for a few as maybe their accounts receivables have ballooned up and they've become more cash strapped. But overall, the market is very active, very healthy.
Okay. Well, that actually sounds pretty positive coming from the investment and industrial side of the business. Maybe setting us up for a little bit different tone, but something that we've seen from the management of brokerage is there have been a lot of companies who, especially on the office side of the business, have been avoiding long-term commitments. Right? There's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and so there's some hesitance to make the sort of investments that come with a 10-year lease. With that, though, landlords still need to fill space. So I wonder a little bit what you have seen from the side of incentives that landlords are giving, and how are deals happening on that space. Let's start with our office and tenant expert, Laura.
So it's been interesting because when you have a brand new building that is in shell condition, it's almost expected that a tenant going in there would sign a 7, 10, or even 12-year or more lease. And these tenants are really hesitant to do that, just as you said. So it becomes a real challenge for a landlord to attract a new tenant to their brand new space. So brand new space, I think, is going to be a bigger challenge for a lot of landlords. So what they're doing is actually giving as much tenant improvement money as they possibly can for even a shorter deal. It used to be that we would see call it a $60 per square foot tenant improvement allowance, and that would be something given on a 10-year deal. Where now we're starting to see that same amount of money given on a 5 or a 7-year deal, because that's the only, that and free rent really are the only tools in their arsenal. Like, most landlords don't want to drop their lease rate because of how heavily it affects the investment value of their asset. So it really is loading up free rent, loading up tenant improvements as much as possible, and really trying to offer as much flexibility as they can in other aspects of the lease, whether it's signage or any parking. Like, that's a big deal. Buildings with more parking are going to be at a greater advantage than those who are not as well parked. And also building amenities. We're seeing a lot of landlords start to create campus-wide amenities that will attract tenants, like building lounges and very large fitness centers. Gone are the days of a 10 by 20 fitness center. Now they're fitness centers with house service and state-of-the-art equipment and just beautiful locker rooms. So we're seeing a lot of focus on building amenities and what they can do as far as tenant attraction in that realm. And then another big part is, how does that building connect to public transit? And we're seeing a lot of buildings create shuttle service to mass transit to enable people to get to their building quickly and easily. So they're really pulling out all the stops to try and get these tenants to come to their buildings. And then when you have an existing building that is second generation space or already built out, a lot of landlords are actually getting that spaces or building spec suites or something so that you can kind of tell what it's going to look like. Flexibility in design is a big thing because some of these landlords get a little nervous about the credit of these companies coming in. So they're starting to have more of an overall say in how the space is actually designed. If nowadays, I would say if there's a tenant that wanted to come in and build out 100% office space everywhere with no open space, a landlord's going to have a hard time with that. So they want more open space, more flexibility in the space itself as kind of a backup plan that if a tenant were to default, the space is well designed from the start to be able to backfill it quickly.
So Ryan Flint, maybe you could touch on this a bit. I know you had phenomenal success filling a lot of office space that you guys had coming on the market through COVID. Could you maybe talk to some of the things that you've done with your landlords there?
Yeah, Adam, I would like to say that there's a little bit of luck in that as well, but it's just positioning ourselves in the best place possible. Part of the uniqueness in this time was how can we be creative with our landlords in our approach to bringing tenants. And being up in Davis County compared to Lehigh or Draper, it is a challenge. The great thing that we have, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is the employment retention in Davis County. Well, luckily there are a few companies up in Davis County that have needed office space. There's a lot of infrastructure on major highways and roads that are being done, and those companies have needed to land in our offices along with some startups. There's some entrepreneurship up in Davis and Weber County that a lot of people put by the wayside, and it's been really fun and encouraging. And so over the past 9 months, almost 100% of all of our Class A office was filled and leased at the rates that we were pre-COVID, and there was no extra concessions. And again, I think that there's a little bit of luck to that, but landlords were prepared to execute, and we were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So let's pivot the discussion a little bit actually onto the retail front here with Stu. And we're going to get retail, which I think was probably the sector that saw the greatest, disruption and brunt initially. I live just above the Riverwoods, and I remember in late April, I went on a run with my wife at 7 p.m. and we literally just ran through the Riverwoods as it was completely empty. And for those who don't know, right, the Riverwoods is a large retail dining development down there in Provo. So we've seen all of this disruption. What have you been seeing in retail, and specifically, Stu, what do you think will stay? As we come 10 years from now, what are we going to say is like, oh, that was because of 2020?
Well, I think a couple of things come to mind. I think the biggest thing right now is I think every retail building that's 200,000 feet or less is going to have multiple drive-throughs. And I said that a little jokingly, but drive-throughs seem to be the savior for a lot of the QSR and fast food guys. To give you an example, we're working on a little Arby's deal, and we just got their sales numbers back from January to June. And their worst 2 months were January and February. And in March, they closed their dining room like all of them did. And their best months were the next 4 months. And it shows the value of these drive-throughs for restaurants, again, and the fast food and QSR guys. And now you hear talk of potentially C-stores doing drive-throughs just because it's easy, it's convenient. And in these kind of situations, it's interesting to see what happens. So most of the projects we're doing now where we have pads, almost every food tenant is demanding a drive-through, which has made it interesting. Another point is never walk by a case of toilet paper without buying it, because there'll always be a shortage. And I think another one that's kind of interesting to think about is when the government came out and said to retailers that only the essential stores are going to allow to be open. And by seeing that, by them doing that, we saw stores like Ross and TJX and those guys literally shut 1,800 or 2,000 stores, just completely down, just closed. And I think the thing for retailers is to try to figure out how you become an essential retailer in the United States. Part of the reason being is that I spoke to Steve Schill at Schill Sporting Goods. The best 4 months of Schill Sporting Goods in the state of Utah has been the months from June to October in regards to sales. And they were touted as an essential use and were able to stay open. I go back to people like Ross stores where they literally had to shut down. And when they did that, all those inventories didn't get sold. And literally sitting there in their stores, fully occupied with no people in them until the government allowed them to open. Once they did that, they had lots and lots of people and lines out the door, but they had to discount that inventory 70 to 80% to get rid of it because of the next inventory that's sitting in warehouses across the country going into these stores. And so it was really tough on the lead time for those guys that literally had to close to get back up to speed, just to catch up with inventory and things like that. So it's pretty interesting to look at that. Every one of them I've talked to basically said we would never close again just because you lose your employees, some furloughed a portion of them, all those things. And it was just tough on the guys, the tenants that had to close. So figuring out how you become an essential tenant's important. One of the real bright spots is Costco. And just to give you an idea, I got their October sales, and the sales in 2020 in October exceeded October of 2019 by 15.7%. And to put that in dollar amount, which is almost $2 billion more in sales in 1 month than they did a year ago. And because of that, we're seeing them do obviously more deals here. But I think in 10 years, that's what we're going to look back and see. And I hope on the drive-through that cities and counties are a little more lenient on allowing those to happen within their communities, because those that didn't have it saw sales drop probably anywhere from 45 to 65%, where you see on the other hand, this little Arby's deal, that their sales were greater with just the drive-through than they were with the dining room. So I think that's what, that's what we'll see in 10 years. So.
Well, thank you, Stu. So how much of Shield's increased sales was you personally?
Only a teeny bit.
So you brought up toilet paper and the inventory, which takes me to industrial, which I think is another place where we'll see a lot of change, especially for Utah in the market moving forward out of this. Jared, what do you see evolving over the next 10 years because of this?
So industrial is the new retail. Concrete boxes are the new hot thing. And e-commerce has really flattened out any locational advantages or disadvantages with so many industries and so many consumers in terms of access to the products that they want. I'm with Natalie. We're going to get through this pandemic. The vaccines are going to work. 6 to 8 months from now, COVID will hopefully not be something that is uttered hundreds of times a day within my earshot. But I think some of the things that will be long lasting are the lessons learned of just-in-time inventory management controls, that looks great on paper. CFOs love to lean up their supply chains and not have assets on their books, to have those assets showing up at the exact moment that they need them. We've recognized through this pandemic that just simply isn't smart business, and it's not possible. And so a lot of the clients that I work with have examined that. They have increased the amount of inventory that they're holding. They've looked for the weaknesses in their supply chain. But we talk about what are we going to blame on 2020? I want to shift that conversation a little bit to politics. We've had a tectonic shift in the political landscape this year. And going into 2021 with a new administration in the White House is going to be very interesting. And so I think there may be a whipsaw effect of some of those policy changes. I'm hoping it doesn't affect commercial real estate too awful much, but the tax codes are being highly scrutinized. I think there's going to be a lot of attention on some of the favorable tax protections that real estate has had for a very long time. And so it's those kinds of things that I'm kind of looking towards and listening carefully to what's being said and what's not being said in that regard. But we've learned a lot, and I think Utah is going to come out on top of the pile because of the workforce, the youthfulness, the business-friendly state that we're in, and the fact that all of a sudden, a computer click is a computer click. Nobody cares if it's coming from a warehouse in Utah or a warehouse in New Jersey. And so that's going to continue to accelerate our success here.
Thank you, Jared. For those joining us, I think just a heads up, I think we will take a few minutes over the 11:30 times. There's a couple more questions I want to get to this panel, and we're just getting such great insights from everyone, so I don't really want to take advantage of this. One thing that we've been hearing a ton about in the press, and Natalie touched a bit on it, is the large in-migration to Utah. We're seeing this both from a population standpoint and from a capital standpoint. The news is talking a lot about investment coming from outside of Utah into Utah, as Utah's really been seen as one of the top resilient economies. It's interesting, I asked you all for where the floor was, and it was a very resounding positive remark from our team here, and I think international capital markets have seen that. What will Utah look like, and how will this change our landscape with this new influx of population and capital? Wally, if you want to touch on that for us.
Yeah, well, from a capital standpoint, I would say, anecdotally for me and my team, we are being absolutely inundated by out-of-state investors. In pre-COVID, I thought that, I was always surprised at the number of out-of-state investors coming into our market. Post-COVID, I feel like that has doubled or tripled or more. I sat down yesterday and I looked through all the calls and emails I had gotten this week, just Monday and Tuesday of this week, on new deals from new investors on our available listings. I got 25 emails or phone calls inquiring about our listings. 19 of those were from out-of-state investors looking to acquire their first deal in Utah. And that's over 2 days, but that's a very good representative sample of what we're seeing on a daily basis. People want to be here. We, as Natalie mentioned earlier, we also track all the reports and research papers coming out, and Utah's always ranked up there in the top few. The PwC ULI Emerging Trend Report for 2021 just came out. I think that's my favorite report that gets released each year. Salt Lake City, or the Salt Lake Metro region, was ranked 7th overall in the country for real estate prospects in 2021. So overall, we were 7th in the country. We were 3rd in terms of multifamily investments, and we were number 1 in terms of office investments. We were the top recommended market in the country for people to invest in office buildings in 2021. So to me, that's really incredible. People are seeing those reports. It's making them come here. Every day I get a call from a new investor that said, I just moved up to Park City, or I'm living in my house in Park City for the next year. I want to buy apartments in Salt Lake. So that's not slowing down. It definitely won't slow down next year. It creates some challenges for local Utah investors. It's gotten really, really pricey here. It's made it a lot harder to find deals, to compete for deals. It's forced local investors to start looking in secondary or tertiary markets outside of Salt Lake and outside of Utah. So it definitely brings challenges, but it's not going to slow down. So it's something that we need to figure out.
Laura, how does that affect the office space, and with this influx of immigration capital, what are you seeing?
Well, what we've learned is that people can work from home, and that means they can work from almost anywhere. So we're finding that a lot of companies are saying, you know what, we want to be able to have a central headquarters where people can come and work, but the recruiting limits have now almost gone completely by the wayside. Like somebody who works here can easily hire someone who lives in San Francisco, or someone in San Francisco could easily relocate to Utah and still keep their same job that's headquartered in San Francisco. It really has opened up the market to just be able to say, you know, I can live wherever I want now because I can work. So people are gravitating to areas with high quality of life. So these areas like Salt Lake and Boise and some of these other markets that have a very high quality of life are receiving a lot of attention nationally from companies that say, go ahead and work wherever you want, because we're going to adopt some kind of hybrid model or completely work from home model. So it's a positive thing for, I think, everyone here.
And I think we've seen Utah is so well positioned in that world of work where you want. You know, we're sitting in a beautiful office right now where, you know, I can look out the window and see a golf course about 30 seconds to the south of me, and drive 15 minutes up and be skiing, you know, on the best slopes in the country. And that resonates with a lot of people. I've had a lot of my friends from the Bay, from New York, calling me saying, hey, where should I live? I'm going to come to Utah and, you know, just work from here and do my investment banking, you know, out of this spot. And so I think there will be, you know, a lot of strength coming to this. Ryan, you've dealt with a lot of investors from out of state and different out of state companies recently. What are you seeing on that front?
Well, Adam, Raleigh said it beautifully. It really is like the DMV. I believe Bryce Blanchard in an NAIOP symposium talked about the analogy of the DMV, where people come take a ticket and sit on the sidelines and wait. We're getting a lot of that right now on all products as well, from even retail investments to offices to industrial. Industrial obviously is very strong, along with multifamily. But my comment to that would be that Utah and our companies and developers and investors have positioned our state really well. We were called the Crossroads of the West for our supply chain and logistics. And I believe I heard just last week that people are calling it Crossroads of the World. And that's a really big compliment for Utah. The infrastructure of the new airport and all the major roads with the intermodal hub, you know, Hill Air Force Base, it's just a really good place to do business. And then what we're seeing in northern Utah is how well the employee retention is. You know, yeah, there's a lot of remote working, but those that aren't remote, the job retention here and keeping people comfortable is making northern Utah very successful. You know, another note that I made was, you know, there's a big in-migration. I talked to one of my friends that's a very big residential developer that sent me a couple slides this morning from a few studies that he's done. And, you know, he's saying that prices are continually going up on the residential. There are no quote unquote COVID deals like maybe we saw in 2008, 2009 from that perspective. And I believe that cities are becoming a little bit more educated that rooftops are needed in order to drive people to work and play and live in the same community. One thing also we have up in northern Utah is the Hill Air Force Base. It's Utah's largest employer. And a big push for us in the past year has been to develop residential and mixed use projects so that, again, it's something comfortable, whether they're working from home, there's amenities nearby, there's places that you can call to deliver and kind of have that last mile. Amazon has positioned themselves beautifully in our market. You can order something online and sometimes even the same day it's here. So I think Utah, I'm very bullish. As we saw in the voting this year, Utah is getting a little bit more diverse. And I think a lot of that is coming from California, which for our state is healthy. It's fun to see our state grow. It's fun to see the economy grow. And people talk so highly about our state.
Thank you, Ryan. So as we look towards wrapping up here, one final question I want to ask everyone, just get a quick response from each of you, is on the aspect of opportunity, right? You know, we've seen throughout history that fortunes are made coming out of downturns, out of times of disruption, when markets are changing and when people can identify, you know, what the opportunity is and get in on that. Would each of you maybe just take a quick moment and touch on where you see the opportunity moving forward? Laura?
I think for my clients in the office arena, the opportunity really is to take a look at the way their business is running and to create more efficiency within that and to develop hybrid models of work, because studies will show 80 to 90% of employees want a hybrid model. They want to be able to work from home at least 1 to 2 days a week and then have an office to come into to get that social collaboration and the connectedness that they need to feel in an office building. But as a company, your opportunity is to be able to capitalize on that in your recruiting and talent retention. Get more efficient, figure out how you develop these programs and deploy them quickly, and you will be able to get a competitive advantage with employee retention.
Thank you. Raleigh?
I think the biggest opportunity that I see is on the housing side. Natalie and Lou touched on it earlier. I saw an attendee throwing a question earlier about multifamily. I think the biggest opportunity is related to affordable housing. I remember moving here 7 years ago and kind of laughing when people would talk about, I moved here from San Francisco, hearing people talk about affordable housing in Salt Lake was kind of funny to me at the time, but the last 2 years, my eyes have been open to, holy cow, it really is becoming an issue here. We've been top in the country in housing appreciation over the last few years. Our rents are skyrocketing. So addressing affordable housing is a huge opportunity. It's a huge challenge. Affordable housing doesn't necessarily just mean subsidized, government-backed housing. It means developing and creating a housing product along the spectrum from apartments to single-family homes that the average worker can rent or buy. So I think there's a big opportunity there for our state.
Thank you, Raleigh. Stu?
I think the retail sector, it's been interesting to see during this pandemic that some of the major tenants that we haven't heard of or heard from, I should say, for the last number of years, 5, 6, 8 years, are now all of a sudden being a little more active in the market. I think the great thing for Utah is twofold. Number one, we talked about the population influx here for retail populations, everything. And we've seen some of these comps that I brought up with Costco in Utah alone. Some of these stores are comping double digit, which is unheard of. And so they keep doing more and more deals. But because of the influx and because we're open for business, tenants like Shake Shack, REI, and those guys are looking to do more deals in Utah because they can actually do them here. They're not shut down. Their construction isn't shut down like it is in the Northwest, some of those places. They still need to open stores. And Utah's the place they can do it. And the sales are justifying it. And like we've talked about, the influx of population. I just looked up the third quarter of this year. Sales homes were up 13% over last year. And I know last year was supposed to be a boomer year. So as everybody's talked about, that's obviously one of the keys to all of this. There's a part of me that loves it, another part being probably the oldest guy here that hates it. So I always love going up and skiing, snowboard, and racing the tram down where you can't do that anymore. But I think we are all very fortunate and lucky to live in Utah, because I think there are so many benefits that we always knew this would happen. And I think everybody's seen that now. And that's why we're seeing such a huge influx of the population, plus businesses and tenants, and the volumes in that they're doing here are pretty outstanding right now.
Thank you, Jared.
So I guess two messages. The first would be to landlords on the landlord side of things, take advantage of cheap capital, apply some risk to it, and build. We don't have enough. There's not enough in the pipeline. We need more space here in Utah to sustain the continued demand for warehouse space. On the tenant side, I think the opportunity is to look for ways to create value add the products that you're selling. Maybe look at manufacturing stuff here versus just assuming it's always going to be cheaper to manufacture overseas. I don't think that's the case anymore with a lot of the automation that is available in the manufacturing world today. I think you can squeeze some of that invisible cost out of your supply chain by looking at nearshoring or onshoring, some of your products and services.
Thank you, Jared. And Ryan, take us home.
Yeah, all of those comments were great. What I have down is there's a low supply, and I'm with Jared. You build it, and they will come. We see it day in and day out. The buildings that are and investors and landlords that are building warehouses are getting absorbed quickly. I also see a huge opportunity in residential, whether it's townhomes, multifamily, single family homes, especially up in northern Utah, and I'm sure it's across the board. My one message that I have heard and been a part of and even implemented in my own business is to refine your processes and systems to be more efficient and create value. The companies that are doing this are having uber success. And I think Utah 2021 is going to be special, and those that put themselves in a position to be successful will have what they want.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, and thank you to our great panel that we've had here today. It's such a privilege to get to work with each of you, and it's a privilege, being at Colliers. These are 5 of our, great agents. To think that there's, another 125 that we have here in Utah working in the trenches every day is such a pleasure. And to know that we, have such great knowledge, at our fingertips. Please, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'll put you in contact with whoever's best suited to answer those questions. At Colliers, we feel a very strong responsibility to, be a partner to our community, especially as we've gone through these difficult times of this disruption with our clients, with our neighbors. We want to do our part to help all of us have a phenomenal 2021. So as we close today, I want to thank once again Alan and Natalie for joining us and bringing their insights to our panel. And earlier in the year, we were constantly saying, stay home, stay safe. I think after everything I've heard today, we'd go with stay positive, test negative. And we will close out on that note. Thank you, everyone.